Good morning, everyone. My name is Colleen, and this is going to be a beginner's talk on writing and publishing Puppet modules. And what I want to talk about is some strategies you can use from a beginner's perspective for designing your modules, outline some of the steps you need to get your modules published, and then talk a little bit about how you can make your modules better. When I first gave this talk, I was still a student at Portland State University. I learned most of what I know about Puppet as a student worker sysadmin at the IT department for the College of Engineering at Portland State. We called it the Computer Action Team, or the CAT. And we used Puppet there to manage a pretty diverse infrastructure, helping students, instructors, and faculty and researchers. And we published a lot of our modules on GitHub and the Forge. And my first public module was the CollectD module. I helped write, with a lot of help and mentorship, helped write that module. And part of the reason I want to give this talk is because I want to share some of my experiences that I learned from writing that module from the ground up. Now, it turns out I liked writing Puppet so much that I started an internship at Puppet Labs last summer, and I'm going to be continuing as a full-time module engineer at Puppet Labs next week. So since we're starting from the beginning, let's talk about, well, what is a Puppet module? It's an encapsulation of configuration for a service. It's a structure containing an organized set of Puppet code and data. You can kind of think of it like a system package or a gem in a lot of cases. But as a beginner, most of what you need to know is it's an encapsulation for your code. It's where your code is going to be written. So what should you be writing a module to do? You should be writing a module in the Unix philosophy, writing a module to do one thing well. You want to avoid having these monolithic modules that try to manage several things at once. And that way, if you're avoiding that, you can make your modules a little more portable, both within your own environment and into other environments if you choose to share your module. So some examples are you could set up SSH with your module, MySQL, Apache, sudo, iptables, SE Linux, any one component of a server that needs to be set up, you can set up with your module. Additionally, we sometimes write modules to extend Puppet functionality. So some examples of those are the standard lib module, which provides you with some functions you can use, and the concat module, which helps you construct configuration files from fragments. We won't talk about how you write these types of modules, but these types of modules can be very useful to you when you're writing your own modules. The strategy from a high level is use Vagrant or whatever your virtualization environment is to set up a clean environment. And then especially if you're new to Puppet or the service you're setting up, you want to set up the service without Puppet first. This is really important because you need to get to know how this service is installed, what its configuration files look like, where those configuration files are, and if there's anything interesting about this service, if it has a special PPA or a special repo, or it has a strange installer, or it needs a special line of bash to make it go for some reason, all it needs to be written into your Puppet module in order to automate it. Then once you actually feel comfortable with setting the service up manually, then you start iterating. You write Puppet code, you make sure it compiles, maybe swear at it a little bit, and then make sure your service is still running, and then wipe your VM and run your Puppet code again, because what happens a lot is you will, in the course of setting up this service or debugging your Puppet code, you will have accidentally ninja'd something in, and Puppet doesn't know about it and can't automate it. So you need to start again from a clean slate, make sure your Puppet really does automate your service, and if it doesn't, keep writing code to fix it. Getting into the details a little bit, the layout of a module is going to look a little bit like this. The manifest directory is going to hold classes and defined types. This is where your Puppet code is going to be written. Files holds flat configuration files, so these get copied straight from the master to the client. Templates also holds configuration files, but these are dynamic ERB templates that get generated based on your Puppet code. Lib directory holds plugins, which is basically any Ruby code that you write to extend your Puppet functionality. The test directory holds smoke tests, or sometimes example usage, and sometimes this is also named an examples directory. And the spec directory contains automated RSpec tests. Since this is a beginner's talk, we're mostly going to focus on manifest files and templates. And we'll talk a little bit about testing as well. To start out writing a module, you can use the Puppet module generate tool to create the layout of a module with some boilerplate templates. And if you're using a sufficiently modern version of Puppet, this is going to ask you some questions which will generate a metadata file, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And this tool doesn't create everything for you. You'll still have to create this files directory and the templates directory. And you also don't have to use the tool at all. You can create all this by hand. One kind of gotcha of this tool is that after you need to generate it by giving it a name that is the username dash module name. But Puppet won't be able to find your module if it has a dash in it, so you need to rename it back to just the module name. So that's something that caught me up, catches other people up, and something that's worth knowing. As you can see, we're going to start writing a basic SSH module. So for those people who haven't seen Puppet before, we're not going to talk about the exact syntax of Puppet, but I want to lay out what a manifest looks like briefly from kind of a high level. It's going to start out with a class in a file called init.pp in your manifest directory. We're going to ensure that the OpenSSH package is installed. We're going to copy a customized configuration file into place, but only after the package is installed. And moving down a little bit, we're going to ensure that the service is running, that it starts on boot, and that it restarts if the config file is ever changed by Puppet. And of course, we're going to dump a customized config file into the files directory. And this is easiest to find by just installing SSH manually and copying this file. And it's a good idea to add a comment to the top of your file, letting people know that this is managed by Puppet, so that once Puppet runs again and changes everything back, it's not a surprise. So in slightly smaller font, this is the full SSH manifest. It's going to work on a Debian system. And this is the most common structure you're going to see in any Puppet module that's setting up a service: package, file, and service. And then to use this module, you're going to include the class either in a node definition or in some other manifest. And you also want to write a test in your test directory that shows people how this is going to be used, so people can run Puppet apply on it and see how it's going to be used. So this will work great in one platform in our environment, but if we have a slightly more diverse environment, or if we want to share this module to other environments, or we want to configure SSH differently depending on which host we're using, this isn't going to work very well. We need this to be a little more portable. Modules should be providing an interface that's going to abstract away the complexity of the task of setting up this service so that a user of the module doesn't have to know how SSH or Apache or MySQL or whatever, they don't have to know how it's set up. They can just use your module and set it up that way. So the consequences of me as a user of your module having to modify your manifest or modify your static files is that if you upgrade your module and I'm still trying to maintain a fork that has changes in it, that just becomes unnecessarily complex to try to maintain. So to start making this module a little more portable, we're going to move the file out of the static files directory and the templates directory. We're going to give it an ERB extension, and we're going to start by replacing these hard-coded values with some Ruby instance variables. And then we have to make some changes to the manifest to accommodate that. We're going to make our class parameterized. We're going to add some parameters that reflect what values we want to be changing in the template. And we're going to set these values to some sane defaults, if the defaults are applicable. And then when you use the class, you're going to use this resource-like declaration syntax where we can specify what parameters we want to be passing to this class. And you can also use high-res data bindings to do this, but I won't talk about how that works. This is the general idea of how you're going to use a parameterized class here. This approach is going to work most of the time for most services, but there's some other strategies you can use for designing your modules. The first strategy you can use is exchanging this long list of parameters for an options hash. So what could happen is if you wanted to actually outline every single parameter in that SSHD config file, your class would end up having many, many, many parameters. It gets very, very long. So what is sometimes appropriate is to manage some of the important parameters and then let the user specify what other parameters they want in a hash. So what we're doing here is we have the ports in an array so that we can iterate over the ports in our configuration file, and let the user specify what key value pairs they want in their options hash here. And what this will look like in the template is we can, again, iterate over the ports and print out each port that the user has specified. And then for each key value pair that the user has specified in this options hash, we can print out the key and the value. And that will work for some small things. The downside of this method is that it's much harder to validate what's coming into your class. So if a user ends up passing in the wrong thing, they'll see something along the lines of SSH won't restart, rather than the Puppet code just not compiling. So this is an approach for some things, but not applicable to everything. Another strategy you can use is taking advantage of this include directive that a lot of services have. We use this in the collectd module, where the default configuration file is just a list of XML-style plugins and configuration. And what we did is we wiped out the original configuration file and replaced it with this include conf.d/star in this configuration file, and then managed each plugin individually as its own file. And Apache and sudoers and lots of other services will support this. And this makes it easier for a user to look at instead of this long list of plugins type of thing. Not all services will really support this very well, so another option you can use is to use the concat module to construct configuration files. So this is one of many helper modules, and the concat module is going to help you kind of construct a config file piece by piece. So you can first declare this target and then add fragments, and you can stick these fragments into conditional logic. You can have them in different classes, and they will end up being one synchronized file in a specific order. Along kind of similar lines, we have the INI file module, which will help you manage INI-style configuration files. So if you have an INI-style config file, you can use this INI setting type, and it will allow you to set which section you're setting and set these key value pairs for this INI-style file. And Puppet and PuppetDB and OpenStack and a number of other things will use this INI file syntax. So this is very helpful in these cases. The last type of templating strategy is to use, it's not really a templating strategy anymore, but it's to use Augeus, which is a pretty versatile tool that can let you change lines in a static file dynamically. So Puppet has a built-in Augeus resource that can allow you to change lines in these configuration files. You can see it has a changes directive, which will set a key to a specific value. And there's also an Augeus providers module, which will give you specific types to manage different types of resources. So we actually have an SSHD config type, and we can give it a specific key and set a specific value. So this becomes really handy if it's difficult to manage a particular config file, and you just want to set specific lines in it. So after you've gotten a solid templating strategy or solid design strategy, the last thing that you need for a dynamic portable module is to have smart parameter defaults. So what we do here is we add a params class. And here we're adding support for Red Hat by allowing the service to be called SSHD rather than SSH. Because if you try to restart SSH on a Red Hat machine, it's not going to work. So then we use this in our original manifest by including the class and then referring to the new service variable in our service's title, so that this will work both on a Red Hat machine and a Debian machine. And this is left up to the module to figure out which operating system this is going to work on. And this is a very standard pattern you're going to see in most every module. And the user shouldn't have to set this parameter themselves. They shouldn't have to pass in whether they're restarting SSH or SSHD. This is useful because the module can figure out what is applicable to your operating system. All right, now we have a pretty solid module. It's going to be pretty portable, and we can share it. So the Forge is the place for sharing our open source modules. And we can use this to search for modules and publish our own modules. The first step to publishing your module is you need a metadata.json file. If you've ever heard of the module file, this is the thing that's replacing it. And you can find examples of what this looks like online. It's kind of just a big JSON blob. But it's going to define the metadata the Forge uses to index and install your module. Most importantly, it's got your, the name of their module, the version of your module, some keywords, operating systems it supports, and most importantly, the dependencies your module has. So if your module is using a function from standardlib, or if you're using a concat to construct files, your module is depending on these modules. So you need to write that into your metadata.json file. And if you use the Puppet module generate tool in the beginning to outline the original structure of your file, most of this will already be generated for you. And you can just fill in some of the extras like the dependencies. So quick note, the Forge uses semantic versioning. And briefly, what that means is you have a patch number, which is any minor bug fixes, minor number, which is new features and bug fixes, major number, which is any backwards compatibility breaking changes. So every time you make a new release to the module, you want to increment that version number, and you want to also add a changelog and entry to the changelog. And this will help people understand whether they need to upgrade to fix a problem they've been having with their module, or if this module is going to break something for them. And this particular changelog is an example from the Puppet Labs Apache changelog from a little while ago. And of course, now that you have a piece of software, you need documentation. So the README should be explaining the purpose of the module, should give examples of how the module is going to be used, including, and it should include what platforms it supports. If you use the Puppet module generate tool, again, you'll already have a boilerplate template for this, or you can download a markdown template, and this is going to help you follow the standards for what a good README should look like, and also help you a lot with the markdown syntax. And of course, since your module is a piece of software, it needs to be licensed. Most modules are using the Apache 2 license, but if that doesn't work for you or for your company, you can go to chooselicense.com to figure out a different license. Now that you have all those components, you can build the module with the Puppet module build tool, and this will generate a checksums file and create a tarball that you will be able to upload to the Forge. Now we have all the basics down, we have some design, and we're able to publish the module. And now I want to talk a little bit about making your module better by adding tests. The reasons why we test are it's going to give us a little bit of assurance that your Puppet code's not going to break in production systems. And it gives us all a baseline that contributors can use to kind of contribute and have the same guidelines for what is working and what is not working. If it's green, it's working. Red is not working. And I'd like to go into detail about how to write and run tests, but it's actually a really big topic, and it really deserves its own talk. But we can at least get started with learning some of the tools that are going to be useful to you as module writers. The first type of testing is smoke testing, and this isn't automated at all. And what this is just running Puppet apply on manifest in your test directory. And this is going to make sure that the catalog compiles without any errors, and you can visually inspect the output to make sure it kind of is doing what you think it should be doing. And you can run it with --noop on a live system, and it won't hurt anything. Sometimes, though, this --noop isn't very reliable, especially with the concat module in particular. So what I would recommend is running without the --noop on a testing system, testing environment, and that can get you more reliable results. Next type of testing is unit testing, and from here on out, these are all going to be Ruby-style testing, so you'll need to be adding some extra files to your to your module. So we use RSpec Puppet to do unit testing. And what RSpec Puppet does is it compiles a catalog for you to run unit tests against, and it will check that the things that you expect to be in the catalog are really there. And the benefits of this method are that it runs in a reasonable amount of time, and it can be automated with the GitHub's Travis CI plugin. And what it's really good at is checking your logic. So if you have special logic for a Red Hat system versus a Debian system, it checks that the resources that you expected in these different cases are really still there. The drawback of this, similar with --noop, is it's hard to tell how a real system is going to react to your configuration. You can't really tell if the package name was really right or the service name was really right because you're not testing against a live system. But this will catch most errors. And to start with this type of testing, you'll need to add a gem file and some helper scripts and a rake file. And all these can be copied from other modules because they're all essentially the same. And once you have this gem file, you can bundle install and then run this rake task with bundle exec rake spec, and that will run your unit test for you. What a unit test looks like, very basically, is it's an RSpec type of test. You can define some facts, and then you can check that the catalog contains particular resources that you expect it to contain. Next type of testing is acceptance testing. We use Beaker RSpec to run this black box acceptance testing for our code. And how it works is it will spin up virtual machines, run the code, and then check that what you expected to happen really happened on a live system. So you can check that, for example, port 80 is really open if you've set up Apache, or that if you curl at it, you get a 200 result. These are things you can check against a live system. Some of the downsides of Beaker RSpec is can't be automated with Travis CI plugin, not very easily anyways. And it's very, very slow because you're downloading virtual machine images and booting them up and provisioning them. And that ends up being very, very slow. But you can get more reliable results for checking a real live system. And Hunter Haugen gave a really great talk on using Beaker RSpec, and you can search for that on YouTube. And I believe Alice is going to be giving a talk on Beaker later today as well. And how we run, we will also have the gem file for these. That'll be included in our gem file. And we can run these tests with the bundle exec RSpec on our acceptance directory in the spec directory. What a Beaker RSpec test will look like is a little bit similar because it's still an RSpec DSL. But one of the classic things we'll do that we can check with Beaker RSpec that we can't check with RSpec Puppet is we can check for idempotency. So we can apply the manifest once, and if it fails the first time, that's a failure. But if we apply the manifest again and anything changes, even if it wasn't a failure, well, that's a failure of the test because you're no longer idempotent. And then you can check that resources are there, you can check the services running and things like that. And you can also run arbitrary shell to check that things are the way you expect on your system. The last type of testing is one of the simpler types is linting. So this is just going to check your Puppet syntax, help you with any style problems. And this way, if we all have a single style and we have a linter to regulate that, then all the contributors of your module can be sane and consistent in your style. And there's an automated rake task to do this as well. Now that you have a fully fledged open source project, it's important to be maintaining your module. So you have the responsibility to be fixing bugs as you find them, adding features as you add features in your environment that needs to be pushed up into your open source module, and managing pull requests. So people will find things that they want to use your module for, but it's not quite right or it has a small bug, and you need to be receptive to that and communicative to them about that. And of course, you want to make sure you make a new release anytime something significant changes to your project. Now, since we talked so much about publishing modules, I'll just mention briefly the consumer side of modules. Since a lot of the time, you want to write a module, but there's already something that exists that will suit your needs, so you don't really need to write it yourself. So Forge is going to have a lot of modules. You can look and find them. If you kind of already know which one you want, but you weren't exactly sure of the name, you can use the Puppet module search command line tool to find it. And once you find the right module, you can use the Puppet module install tool to install it into the module path of your system. Of course, you don't need to use the Puppet module tool to install your modules. You can go to the source directly and clone it into your version control system, or you can use R10K or Librarian Puppet to manage your modules that way. And I believe there's going to be an R10K talk later, or a workshop later today. And then the modules README should explain how to use the module. So you should be able to incorporate that into your manifest. Okay, so we're just about wrapping up. All the code, or most of the code that I wrote for these slides is available on GitHub as just an example, not a production module. There's lots of great documentation on the Puppet Labs website that helped me a lot, will help you a lot. And if you want more one-on-one help, there's the Ask.Puppet Labs forum, there's Pound Puppet on Freenode, and there's the Puppet users mailing list. And these are all really great resources for finding support. And if you want to find me, again, my name is Colleen Murphy, and I have some online identities. And at this point, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to take them. And if you have good questions, I have 2 copies of the Pro Puppet book, and I will give them away if you guys have questions. Yes?
So what nuances are there for Windows modules versus these tools primarily on Linux, but what we have for the Windows side for some of the always all cross-platform, or are there any nuances?
So the question was, what nuances are there for Windows modules versus the other modules? The answer is I'm not actually sure. I don't have a lot of experience with Windows modules. I believe that Beaker RSpec has support for Windows modules. And I'm sure that Puppet Lint can be run on any manifest. Otherwise, in terms of designing your modules, it should be just about the same. And publishing your modules will be the same as well. Yes? It's not that it doesn't no-op. It will, -- no-op isn't ever going to hurt your system. The problem is sometimes it's not reliable in its output. So for example, for the concat module, the way it's written, it expects a file to be there, and then we have some fragments added, and it's not going to work really on a fake system, or it's not going to work if it can't really touch the system. So that will cause some things to appear to be errors when they would work on a real system. Okay, and come see me afterwards, and I've got books for you too. Any other questions? Yes?
When designing a module and referring to external data, do you assume that somebody's using Hiera, for instance, or how do you compensate for the fact that data might not be in Hiera, or it may be in Hiera, or it may be somewhere else? Oh yeah, sure, sorry. So when designing a module and you're referring to data outside of the module, because you want to make the module portable, do you assume that data would be in an external source such as Hiera, or how do you figure out really where the user's data might be that the module needs?
So the question is about Hiera and whether you can expect it to be there. And you can't always guarantee that a person's going to be using Hiera, but you can write your modules in such a way that they can specify data either by declaring it through a parameter in your class or by using Hiera data bindings. So you can write your modules in such a way that it doesn't matter.
So that's the question. How do you do that? So do you say if in Hiera, then, or like how do you go about doing that?
No, because what Hiera data bindings will do is it will look in your parameters list, and if those parameters exist in Hiera, then it will pull it from Hiera. If not, it will use the defaults that you gave when you were in your parameters list, or if there aren't any defaults and you didn't specify something, it will fail. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes?
So you mentioned that a module should do one thing and one thing well. Mm-hmm. I was reading the Puppet Pro book after PuppetConf last year, and it talked about having small modules and then including them in other modules. But I was talking to my friend last night, and he says that's no longer considered best practice? How should I do that? Like if I have an NTP package that I want installed, but then I have other modules that require NTP, should I include that in the other module, or should I just try to keep my module standalone?
So we actually have one of the authors of the ProPuppet book, if you would like to take that question.
Yep.
So you want to write a module that does NTP very well. And then once that's contained in the module, feel free to use the include directive in a different module. And you build things out of Legos, but make sure that each Lego set has its own self-referential and is fine. And when you do use like the NTP module, just the way you, Colleen was talking about, you have to add it to your dependency list.
Yep. Yes.
Hey, first of all, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my question is about people externalizing their modules. So I think there seems to be a lot of skittishness about people pushing their modules onto the Forge and elsewhere because there's not that many there despite the number of users. So what are you guys doing to try and get people to share it a bit better and put stuff out there? Or do you, and sorry, the follow-up to that is also, are corporates sort of shipping their own modules within their, let's say, virtual machine templates and so on and so forth?
So I don't have a lot of input or oversight over what other corporations are doing. You can find Ryan Coleman. I'm not sure, maybe he's actually here. He would be able to answer that better. But advice I would give is to not hard code any data values and not hard code IP addresses or passwords or that type of thing. Those can all be parameterized, and then those data values can be stored in Hiera, and that makes it reasonable to share your modules that way. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Okay, hi. About the testing of Puppet modules, what I see at the state right now, that's actually pretty crappy to do integration tests. I have seen that people using Docker for integration tests. What's your take on this?
So Beaker supports Vagrant and Docker and a number of other hypervisor backends. I don't have experience using Docker with Beaker, but I'm sure it's faster. And you can probably find Alice Nodelman and ask her about it.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yes.
I wrote a basic module that is semi-ready for publishing the Forge, but I haven't written any test or anything for it. So is it recommended to post that out there as like a very basic version without test, or is it better to write the test and wait to get that process done?
It's fine to publish it first and then keep improving it as you go.
Okay.
That's perfectly acceptable. It's great.
Hi. When creating modules, as a general rule of thumb, so say you have a module for the Samba config file, do you generally abstract everything out? You don't hard code anything, even all of the various, directives for Samba, or do you only say, well, here's the reasonable ones to, put into either params or Hiera, and then hard code the others? What point do you stop and say, I'm going to either, parameterize every single directive for Samba, or I leave certain ones in?
That's a tough question that we haven't really found a solid answer to, because we want to make everything possible configurable so that it's as portable as possible, but that ends up making our manifests and our templates really complicated. So I would start by parameterizing the things that you think are reasonable, and as people start using your module, they might add pull requests to make things more parameterized.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I work in a really secure environment, and one of the things I've always had to contemplate is where to store passwords and how to store them in like an encrypted fashion. There's a lot of cases where we can't store plain text passwords on the network, so I wonder what your suggestions might be for that.
So passwords, any sensitive data can be stored in Hiera, and Hiera can support multiple backends. So we usually use like a YAML backend, but you can use other kinds of backends if you like. I'm not sure what Hiera's support for encryption is exactly. It supports encryption apparently.
In
Hi, my name is Sean, and I just love your Collectee module. But one of the things I've run into is, I guess, I forget what actually the example was, but I have certain modules in my environment, and I went to install another one from Puppet Forge, and the author had dependencies of some other modules he had written, which were conflicting. The naming was conflicting with modules I already had installed. So I was just wondering, what's the normal way to deal with that?
There's not a very good way to deal with that. You can install these modules manually, or you can use I think there's a -- force option, but that might break things. So the best option is to not use a module that's conflicting, or to try to work with the author to get those dependencies to work out and updated.
Any other questions?
That was a really good talk.
Yeah. If we could everybody give Colleen a big round of applause, I can see why we hired her.